It's a working library. It's a library stuffed full of books from all the way around the world. And all these books, each of the books in this library, are written by someone who's been forced into exile. Language is migratory. It's diasporic. It moves across countries all the time. And written into the walls is this extraordinary, deep history of the destroyed libraries of the world. So when you've written your name in a book in this library, you know that next year this book will be in a library in Mosul. So it's a history of exile. But more than that, it's a celebration of an extraordinary world of people who've had to move, migrate across borders.
Good evening. I'm Hartwig Fischer, Director of the British Museum, and I'm delighted to welcome you to tonight's conversation in the context of Edmund de Waal's Library of Exile. Library of Exile opened at the start of March at the British Museum. Made of walls covered with white liquid porcelain and with, as you've seen, the inscriptions by the artist addressing the destruction of libraries throughout the ages, it contains 4 works by Edmund, and it is filled with books by almost 1,500 writers from 58 countries that all share one experience: exile. Edmund's Library of Exile was conceived as a place of contemplation and dialogue about exile. It explores the critical issue of what it means to lose your home, having to move to another country and speak and perhaps even write another language. The books in the Library of Exile are in dozens of languages, many of them translated. Whilst the British Museum was forced to close its doors twice since March due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the library has nonetheless received thousands of visitors and readers, and it will do so again after the museum reopens its doors on 3rd of December. For those of you who are able to do so, I invite you to visit the British Museum, visit Edmund's library, see his works, and sit down. Open some of the books and read before the library closes on 12th of January, and the books, as Edmund has said, travel to their new home in Mosul's University Library in Iraqi Kurdistan, which was burned down by ISIS after 2014. Today's discussion, No Frontiers, Celebrating Writing and Translation, is presented in partnership with English Pen and is one of many online events exploring themes and issues raised by the library. In his essay, There Is No Cultural Identity, published in 2016, the French philosopher and sinologist François Julien reflects on the concept of difference, which defines identity through exclusion. Julien instead strengthens the notion of écart, a distance or in between, that connects. Julien insists that cultures are interrelated through an in-between that keeps them in sight of each other, each remaining dependent on the other, challenged by the other. What bridges the distance between cultures and enables us to activate them as a resource is dialogue, a dialogue that enables us to comprehend ourselves and the other in our interconnectedness. Now, a true dialogue can only take place in the language of both cultures, Julien claims, between languages. And the basic practical implementation of dialogue, therefore, is translation. Translation bridges the gap, but it also reveals the discomfort, the permanent disquiet, the, if you like, non-definitive nature of any authentic understanding, moving forward through never-ending reiterations. And these are important aspects of what the British Museum, as one of the great comprehensive institutions of human cultural achievements, aspires to: a self-critical but confident pluriversalism, engaging in dialogue to activate its collection as a cultural resource for many millions of people. We are deeply indebted to our sponsors, the AKO Foundation, whose generosity and vision has made this program possible, as well as Edmund de Waal's installation itself. Chaired by Associate Editor of Culture at The Guardian and English Pen Trustee Claire Armitstead, our distinguished panel also includes Syrian translator and author Dima Wannous, Chinese-born British poet and author of Red Dust Ma Jian, and his translator and interpreter Flora Drew. And so, without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Claire and our esteemed guests.
Many thanks, Hartwig. What a fantastic introduction. I shall have to go back and read more of François Julien. It's my enormous pleasure to chair this event, and particularly in the context of what Hartwig was saying about translation being the bridge that connects cultures and on which we all rely, which is something that we at English Pen fervently and passionately believe. And I think we have here, I would say not just 2, but 4 people who demonstrate that beautifully, because the translators will be as involved in this conversation as the writers. And in the double screen, we have Ma Jian and his producer Flora Drew. Ma has 4 books in Edmund's library, of 30 from China. So he's, I think we could safely say, the senior member of this cultural delegation, and Dima Wannous, who is who's going to be translated by Ibrahim Kaduni, who has 1 out of 16 books from Syria. And welcome to all of you. It's very good to see you here. Now, I wanted to just start with quite a simple question, which is to addressing both your most recent books. In Ma Jian's case, it's China Dream, and in Dima's case, it's The Frightened Ones. And just to ask you what the titles of your books mean, because these seem to be very significant words that you've chosen. Should we start with Ma Jian and Flora?
就问你关于中国梦这个书怎么选择这个名字中国梦。
我在写这本书的时候还不知道有武汉新冠病毒会影响到全世界，但是当时我感到习近平在说出他要实现中国梦的时候，我当时除了一种恐惧之外，还感到非常荒诞。
Okay, so when I wrote, I'll speak in the first person. When I wrote this book, I couldn't have imagined it was that the events of Wuhan that we have encountered this year would emerge, but it was inspired by the speech that President Xi Jinping gave that introduced his China Dream, this idea that China would become the center of the world and the model for other countries to emulate. But what I was filled with when I heard him utter that vision of his was a sense not only of dread for what this meant for the world, but also a sense of the absurd.
我首先想到的就是在中国，这个梦其实是中国共产党他自己想象的一个梦。 因为作为中国人来讲，我们只想能够过上能够言论自由的生活，能够自由的思想。但是对于习近平来讲，他还是要把他的这个所谓的中国梦，所谓的红色帝国要铺到全世界。所以我想，我必须要写这么一本书。
So if you ask a Chinese person what their own individual dream would be, an unfiltered response would be for the freedom to live as you choose, to speak as you wish. But this China dream that the president set out was one that was state imposed from above. That is this red nightmare of a dystopia that would control not only the lives of the Chinese people, but would spread beyond China's borders. And it was out of a sense of anger at this vision that made me want to write this book.
我想主要的就是中国梦就是一个谎言，通过写一本书，把这个谎言给揭露出来。就像我们现在已经在这里开会，其实都已经进到了这个中国梦里面了，因为我们都没有办法坐到一起。
So at the heart of it was a sense that China Dream was one big lie, and through this book I want to expose this lie and the consequence of this lie, which is the fact that we today cannot sit in the same room that we are having to speak via Zoom. This is one of the many absurd consequences of China's this China Dream.
And there's a joke in this title as well, isn't there? Which is that the president has been known to ban words that he doesn't like, and the idea that he might end up banning his own slogan because it's the title of a book that he doesn't like.
也是一个荒诞，就中国梦也许会被习近平就审查，因为他本来要的这个你选的这个名字会被习近平审查，因为他不喜欢这个书，是不是？
我想这很有意思，因为这个作为一个关键词的话，你会发现他们下了很大的功夫。中国梦这3个字，你在中国当然可以查到，还是习近平那个中国梦。但是中国梦这本书在中国你一个字也找不到，就证明他们在同样一个词里边，他们这种所谓的科技的集权要用多大的努力才能够去对抗它。
So yes, exactly. But also it's a sign of the sophistication of the censorship machine. The fact that in China Dream, if you Google it, it will only bring up references to Xi Jinping's propaganda vision, but that it is already sophisticated enough to erase any mention, for example, of a book like his that tries to puncture that the propaganda, so that they have, even within that key words, they have been able to differentiate between what is state approved and then what is to be censored.
And it's very, very serious, isn't it? It's the vanishing language that is made to vanish for political reasons. I'm going to stop there for a moment and bring Dima in. Thank you very much for waiting, Dima. The title of your novel is The Frightened Ones, which is equally significant, it seems to me. Explain what this means, and is it the same in Arabic?
نعم، هو طبعا نفس العنوان بالعربي، الخائفون. يعني كان من الصعب جدا أنه اختار أي عنوان آخر لهي الرواية، لأنه الرواية بتتحدث عن الخوف، بتتحدث عن الخوف من الخوف، بتتحدث عن كل هي المشاعر المرتبطة بالهلع السوري أو هلع أي طبعا شعب يعيش نفس الظروف اللي عاشها السوريون لعقود من الزمن. لذلك اخترته فعلا عنوان مباشر بيحكي بيلخص بكلمة واحدة شعور مشترك بين ملايين السوريين عبر سنوات طويلة. إبراهيم.
Yes. It is the very literal equivalent of fear. I mean, the frightened. It tells of fear itself, which is the most common linkage between millions of Syrians who have been subject to this fear. If there is something in common between those Syrians over the last couple of decades, it was fear and the panic, all the panic associated with this sort of fear inflicted on the Syrians in this country. And this is the best choice I could ever found for my novel.
نعم.
Talk a little bit more about the fear of fear.
الخوف من الخوف يعني هو طبعا مصطلح بعتقد متداول جدا بعلم النفس، وهو تجربة بمر فيها معظم من يتعرضون لنوبات هلع، بيشعروا بالخوف من أن يشعروا مجددا بهذا الخوف. فهو مصطلح بالتأكيد متداول جدا، لكن هو بشوفه أنا كان خاص أيضا بالحالة السورية والحالة اللي أنا عشتها في سوريا لأكثر من 30 سنة قبل أن أرحل طبعا بالعام 2011. هذا الخوف اللي كنت أشعر فيه أنا على الرغم من أني كنت محاطة بعائلة يعني جريئة وحرة ومتمردة إذا فينا نقول، لكن مع ذلك هذا الخوف كان موجود بشكل مستمر. الخوف من الخوف هو خوف السوري أن يتعرض للخوف، يعني خوف من أن يتعرض لخوف الاعتقال، أن يتعرض لخوف التعذيب، الاختفاء، المجهول.
Yes, it is quite a common term in psychology, to the best of my knowledge, to the best of my information. I mean, in the context of the panic attack, those who struggles with this sort of fear usually are anxious not to feel the fear itself, to experience it. And this was the sort of fear which I myself experienced like 30 years ago in Syria, before I left 2011, despite the fact that I enjoyed to live within an outspoken family. I mean, in comparison to the general atmosphere in Syria, my parents were quite outspoken and they used to say their word. But yes, I mean, this is the fear which has to do with the different sorts of fear felt by the Syrians. The fear of to be afraid of fear itself, the fear of speaking, the fear of being subject to detention, the fear of being arrested, all these sorts of fear within the Syrian context.
Thank you very much. And from this, connected with this fear is a sense of jeopardy, that is, it's danger that both affects the characters in your writing, and this affects both of you, but also yourselves. So Dima, I know your character Suleima goes to Beirut, takes refuge in Beirut, and the other central character Nazim goes to Germany.
Yeah.
To escape their country. Now, but you yourself were beaten up in Beirut, weren't you? So yeah. Is there a safe place for you?
بيروت أنا بالنسبة لي هي مدينة العالم، وبالنسبة لكتار طبعا، لكن أنا علاقتي ببيروت خاصة جدا، وأنا معجبة بتجربة طبعا العيش ببيروت بسبب الذاكرة المشتركة بين السوريين واللبنانيين. طبعا عم نحكي عن مثقفين وعن الشعبين يعني وليس النظامين، ففي ذاكرة مشتركة غنية جدا لا يشعر معها السوري بأنه غريب، حتى وإن كان هذا الشعور بعدم الغربة هو شعور غير صحي، لأنه أنت بجو أيضا في خوف، وأيضا في هذا الهلع المشترك بين اللبناني والسوري. لكن أنا بالنسبة لي إيه كانت تجربة غنية جدا على الرغم من كل شيء، وكانت يعني خليني أسميها مرحلة عبور واعتياد، تعويد النفس على الابتعاد عن البيت، عن نقطة الارتكاز، تمرين لفقدان يعني الاستقرار، فقدان الأمان، لأنه قريبة جغرافيا، هذا بقصده بالتمرين. ثم طبعا من بيروت جئت إلى لندن قبل 3 سنوات. فبيروت بالتأكيد هي مدينة العالم.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of Beirut, Beirut have a very special place within myself, in my heart. For me, Beirut is the city of the world. It's the cosmopolitan. So, I mean, there is a lot in common between peoples of the two countries. Aside from the political regimes controlling the both countries, peoples there have a lot in common. I mean, they have a common sort of living together. They share a lot in terms of memory. So yeah, Beirut for me was a sort of a passage, a very important stage where I started to train myself out to experience this sense of being uprooted, to start to, I mean, familiarize myself with being away from home, given the fact of the geographical proximity, that you are close to home in a way, but you are away from home in the other way. So I enjoyed my experience in Beirut. It was quite enriching for myself. And from there, I moved to London like 3 years ago.
So I wanted to ask the same question to Ma Jian. Your journey, your relationship with China is continuing, isn't it, even though your books are banned?
你跟中国是什么关系？现在你还是跟他有联系，但是因为你的书被什么时候开始被审查？
我在中国已经消失了很多年了，可能是30年了。在中国，我的名字是不存在的，我的书也是不存在的。那么最开始他们还让我回去，警察可以跟着我。那么最近这将近10年，他们习近平掌权之后，他们认为完全没有必要，就是我就变成了一个彻底的流亡作家，不能再回去了。要说我跟中国的关系，主要就是我的亲人。如果要说是对中国还有什么留念的话，当然我希望我的文学能够汉语能够在中国还能够出版，我还能够回到中国写作。如果没有这个的话，我觉得中国跟我的关系，特别是在习近平时代，真的是完全的是一个噩梦。
So since 1980, for many decades, since 87, I have been disappeared from China. Not only have all my books been banned since my first novel was published in 87, but my name has also erased. You will find no mention of it in any publication there. And for many years, I was still allowed to return, and I did so continually, and I had a home there. But since the era of Xi Jinping, they have decided that it's just not worth it to allow me to return, and giving me no reasons at all for the last 8 years or so, I have been banned from returning. So I am now in complete exile here, with very little hope to return. But my connection remains very strong for as long as I have friends and family in China, and for as long as I continue to write about China. So of course my wish is to return there one day and for my books to be published there one day, but for the time being doesn't fill me with hope.
You're talking there about the Chinese mainland, but you can have until recently been able to go to Hong Kong. Is that right? There was a bit of trouble over the Hong Kong festival a couple of years ago.
最近可以你不能去大陆，但是香港你可以去，但是2年前有文学节，怎么回事？
哎呀，我现在想一下，如果要是2年前我还去了最后一次香港的文学节，但是如果今天去，恐怕已经没希望了，因为它的国安法已经在香港可以说是已经开始实施了，等于说是中国。我想，如果我飞机刚一下来，可能就没有办法进去了。但是我一直在想，中国跟我这么多的一个关系，很多人做生意的人可能认为那里是个天堂，可以赚钱，包括香港也包括中国。但是对于作家来讲，没有言论自由，而且有这么可怕的一个习近平时代的政治审查，那个地方确实是一个中国的噩梦。
So I was based in Hong Kong for many years and used it as a place of semi-exile. 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, I returned to attend the literary festival there, and already at that point I began to feel very nervous. But now the way with the turn of events would mean that I doubt I would even make it into the airport. I would probably be arrested inside the airport. Now there is very little difference between Hong Kong and the mainland. For businessmen, Hong Kong and China is still perhaps a heaven, but for writers, for anyone who believes so profoundly in the importance of freedom of speech and the importance of being able to write without censorship, the mainland and Hong Kong is now a place of great despair.
Thank you very much. So I now want to just move slightly sideways to talk about more directly about the relationship of a writer and a translator in both your very particular circumstances. And I would say that Dima's translator is not Ibrahim. Dina's translator is Elizabeth Jacquet. Is that right, Dima?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So I'm going to start with you and ask you how you came to choose Elizabeth as your translator and what your relationship has been like, how you work together.
So to be on, يعني بصراحة أنا إليزابيث تعرفت عليها لاحقا بعد أن بدأت بترجمة الرواية، فأنا ما كنت بعرف إليزابيث. إليزابيث طبعا عندها علاقة ربما مباشرة بدار النشر، فهم من يختاروا عادة المترجم. لكن يعني الكتاب ترجم لأكثر من 12 أو 13 لغة. كتير كان نادر التواصل بين المترجم وبيني، وهذا أحزنني كتير، لأنه أنا كنت واثقة أنه كتاب صعب لهالدرجة. طبعا صعب مو لأنه أنا كاتبته صعب أو لأنه أنا كاتبته صعب، لأنه هو بالتأكيد كتاب غريب تماما لتاريخ مختلف وجغرافيا مختلفة ومنطقة مختلفة وشعب أيضا مختلف، فبالتالي هو كتاب صعب في مصطلحات محلية جدا، في لهجة محلية جدا، في الخوف يلي ربما المترجم الذي ولد وعاش طوال حياته في بريطانيا، في الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية، في أي بلد أوروبي أيضا، ربما لن يستطيع التقاط معنى الخوف اللي أنا كتبت عنه. إبراهيم في كفي أو وقف؟
Fair enough. I can go ahead. This is a reasonable chunk. Thank you. Yeah, breaching information. I mean, I came to know Elizabeth later on, honestly, as she has been already commissioned by the publisher to start the translation of the book. I did not know her beforehand, because you might be aware that the book has been translated into nearly 13 languages. And what saddened me that unfortunately I did not have the privilege of that close, interchange and interaction with every and each translators, because I did appreciate the very fact that how challenging the book might have been for any translator, who could have been very challenging for him, to capture the nuances of the fear itself. The very local nature of fear and the atmosphere of the book itself. So honestly, I did not have the chance to communicate and interact with Elizabeth before she started translating the book.
نعم، لكن إليزابيث كانت من المترجمين القلائل جدا اللي طلبوا يتواصلوا معي بخصوص طبعا ترجمة الكتاب، وملاحظاتها كانت دقيقة جدا وغنية جدا. وأنا يعني لم أقرأ النسخة الإنجليزية ولا الفرنسية مع أني فرانكوفون، لكن لن أقرأ كتابي لا باللغة العربية مرة ثانية ولا بأي لغة أخرى. لكن بذلت جهد كتير كبير طبعا من خلال الأسئلة اللي أرسلتها، فكنت متأكدة أنه الكتاب سيكون مترجم بشكل جيد جدا.
Elizabeth have been working quite hard on the book, and I could understand this from the very witty and enriching notes and the questions she has posed to me throughout the translation process. Unlike many of other translators in other languages, she dared posing these very challenging and enriching questions. And unfortunately, I did not dare reading my book neither in English translation nor in French, despite the fact that I'm a Francophone myself. And by the way, I did not dare even to read it in Arabic, because I can't do this after I completed writing the book.
Thank you very much. So I'll now move to Ma and Flora. You're partners in life as well as in work, and you have been for a very long time. How does that work?
Well, how does it? I think they're very separate realms. Our life as a family and our life as partners, literary partners, or they're very separate realms. 你觉得我们的生活是一边是饭，一边是家庭，是什么一个感觉？
我想最大的一个区别就是文学就是生活，生活也就变成了文学。那么在这种又在翻译又在故事里面又在生活里面，我觉得这正好是我们的生活。
He's saying the opposite to me. He said there's constant he feels there's constant overlap, that we live in this sort of confused realm of the literary and the mundane and the family and the poetic, and he feels very comfortable in it. So.
但是也有一个很大的麻烦，就是当你的小说的故事里边的角色，他也会参与到我们的生活里面来。比如说我写那个殷之道，关于计划生育，他跟我的这个家，跟我的太太生孩子都是有直接关系。如果我们没有孩子，我不会写这本书。
But he sees also our private lives seeping into his literary creation. For example, his book, The Dark Road. He wouldn't have thought of writing it if I hadn't at the time been pregnant, and that he hadn't witnessed that and he hadn't lived through that pregnancy and then the rearing of young children. And so even though I can add in here, even though it's written by a Chinese peasant woman who's on the run from family planning officials, wandering down the Yangtze River, in fact, there are many allusions to our life, things I have said, things the children have said to us. So he feels there is a constant flow between the private and the literary.
I used the term partners, and I noticed you picked that up. So that And that's quite unusual for a translator and a writer to be partners. And it strikes me that with you, there is a sort of equality, although obviously Ma is doing the writing, but there is a sort of, you're singing to each other through the work all the time. Is that correct?
你觉得我们我所说的一个，我们是一个共同的平等的一个感觉，我们就是一个互相的一个理解。觉得吗？
呀，当然，因为在这个写小说这一部分，当然是我要把一个故事说出来，当然要把这个故事再变成一个另外一个语言，那我认为是完全是翻译的一个非常重大的一个工作。而且他必须跟我一样，也要爱好文学，不然的话，他会变成另一个东西。所以在这点上，我认为必须是非常公平的。那么这种公平包括第一，就是你在翻译的时候，你要注意到这些所有的细节，跟这些在英国人的这个术语里面能够找到一种对应。我不认为就是翻译能够完全是一种中文的这个翻译，我认为这个它还要包括一面，就是到了另一个语言里边，它还是这样的一个故事，还是这样的一种感情，这是最重要的。
He feels he absolutely sees it as a partnership of equals on it, and also despite this osmosis between the two as two very separate realms where you have to be master of your own creation. Yes, and he has spoken before about this feeling that it's a sort of silent dialogue between us, that we don't either have the opportunity or to have in real life, that he feels when he hands over his book to me, that there is that is a start of a new life, a rebirth into something that is a reflection, a mirror image, but something that also can stand on its 2 feet and can live its own life.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I want to move from there into talking a bit more about form. And I'm going to go back to Dima. And you took your novel, it's a sort of dissociative form you take. So you have 2 characters, one of whom is living a life and the other of whom Salim seems to be, Nassim, sorry, seems to be writing the life of that the other character is living. And I wonder, is this a I mean, it's not a very familiar way to write. It's very interesting. And I wonder the extent to which this is a sort of a fracture of trauma.
ابراهيم بس
Dissociative ديما اضطراب تفارقي sort of psychological issue. يشعر الشخص بالانفصال ليس عن نفسه فقط وعن محيطه أيضا. عرفتي؟ تمام. وهي ما أشارت إليه في الشخصية.
اوكي. بس يعني اكيد صحيح انه هذا الفورم يعني بينعكس من الرواية بكل تأكيد، من الشخصيات، من الوضع السوري، من وضعي أنا ككاتبة أيضا غير قادرة على أنه أنفصل عن الواقع وكون فقط كاتبة. يعني من الصعب على الكاتب أنه ينفصل تماما بكل تأكيد عن كل ما يحيط به. فما البال إذا عم نحكي إنه هذه الرواية كتبت بالعام 2015-2016 تقريبا، والكاتبة اللي هي أنا تعيش في بيروت بعد أن تركت سوريا، طبعا الثورة والأوضاع السياسية والأمنية إلى آخره. فهذا الشكل الروائي بالتأكيد بيعكس الخوف اللي أنا حابة أحكي عنه، خوف السوريين، وأيضا بكل تأكيد بيعكس وضعي أنا كإنسان.
Yeah, it reflects, in fact, this form of writing and the structure itself, in a way, it mirrors myself as a person, being the writer myself, who is unable even to detach himself from the very pressing reality. I mean, the many pressing realities ensuing the Syrian plight, with all the catastrophe surrounding us in terms of war and exile, living in Beirut. So yeah, I mean, I couldn't avoid these sort of dissociative characters, because in a way they reflect my personality and the very circumstances I used to live in Beirut.
And what's interesting is that that Nassim tells a more direct version of Suleyma's story than Suleyma is able to tell herself.
إبراهيم بس
نظيم ما يثير
نسيم،
الاهتمام
إيه.
أن نسيم كان قادرا على أن يروي حكاية سليمة، بينما سليمة كانت تستطيع أن تتحدث عن نفسها فقط.
صحيح، ونحن يعني لسنا متأكدين إن كانت الرواية المكتوبة عن سليمة هي رواية نسيم، أم أنه سليمة هي التي كتبتها وحبت تقول إنه هي رواية نسيم، أو تتخيل إنه هذه رواية نسيم. إيه، نسيم بكل تأكيد كان ممكن يكون كان قادر يكتب هذه الرواية، لكن برأيي شخصيات الرواية كلها العنصر المشترك بينها وبين كل السوريين هو تيمة الخوف اللي تحدثنا عنها.
Yeah, even we can't tell. I mean, we can't be certain that it was Nassim who wrote the story or the storyline of Suleyma, but possibly it could have been that Suleyma would liked, or it attracted her to sell it out as being written by Salim in a way. But all in all, I mean, after all what has been, possibly Salim was able, or he was on a better place to tell of Suleyma's story. But what was in common between all the characters and the protagonists through the novel is fear again, and it was the main writer.
I hadn't thought of that about that it was possibly it was all Salima's story. So there you go. I have to think and do another round of thinking about it. So now let's move to Ma and Flora. Ma, you write satire is one of your is a very strong form for you.
讽刺的是吧？你喜欢说一个黑色那个讽刺，这个是。
可能是在我的写作环境里面，可能注定要找到一种风格，这种风格就是尽量的荒诞或者幽默，因为在中国发生的事情，在我的个人生活的经验里边，我没有办法那么直接把它去说出来，你会感觉到这完全是不可能的，因为现实的这种残忍和荒诞，完全超过了我们的语言所能够可以描述的，所以我应该是选择的，更加荒诞一点，更加幽默一些，或者这个幽默你们认为是一种黑色幽默，但是从我的角度来讲，应该是一种红色的幽默，是带着血的幽默，比如说《中国梦》。
So I feel I have no choice as a writer writing about the reality of China and my own experiences, writing about that level of brutality and tragedy. If it wasn't through the filter of humor or satire, it would be unbearable, not just for me to write, but for the reader to read. That it is the only way I can deal with those topics. And some people might describe it as a black humor, but I see it as red humor, not only the red of the Communist Party, but the red of blood and brutality.
Oh, that is a lovely concept. I love that, the idea of red humor. I think I will take that with me into my future. And now I'm going to open up to the audience, because I know lots of people are bursting to ask questions. And I have one immediately from Sylvia Vetter, who asks, says, fear can lead to self-censorship. Is this the biggest problem? I'm going to put that to Dima first.
فهيم.
ديما، الخوف قد يفضي إلى أن يمارس الكاتب رقابة ذاتية على نفسه. هل شعرتي بهذه المشكلة؟
لا، الخوف أكيد يؤدي إلى أنه يعيش الكاتب الخوف وهو عم بيكتب عن الخوف بكل تأكيد، وخاصة إذا كان معني بالمكان يلي عم بيكتب عنه ولم يخرج بشكل كامل بعد. لم يخرج طبعا ليس جسديا إبراهيم، أقصد لم يخرج يعني لم ينفصل تماما عن هذاك المكان. الذاكرة بتوجع، والذاكرة يعني عندما أستعيد بصفاء كامل وبتجبرني إني أرجع أعيش نفس المشاعر. لا، ما كنت خايفة وأنا عم بكتب عن الخوف، لكن كنت عم برجع أشعر ببعض اللحظات من أول وجديد. ما بعرف كيف بالإنجليزي ممكن.
Sure. Yeah, leave it to me. Well, I don't think that fear imposes a sort of self-censorship on the author as he starts or goes through writing. But what I feel rather that as under fear, under the heaviness of fear, as we write, probably we experience fear again. As we write, we continue to fear and re-experience this fear, because certainly when the author, like me, did not finish, his homework of disassociating himself from that traumatic memory, because memory can be truly traumatic and painfully pressing on the writer. But on the same time, as we go through writing, it is a sort of healing in a way. So I started to recall the very brilliant and bright moments of my past memory in order to counter the very fear itself.
Thank you. Can I ask the same question to Ma? So fear can lead to self-censorship. Is that the biggest problem?
恐惧会变成会让人作假、自我审查，这是不是最大的危险？
当然是最大的危险。如果没有这种政治恐惧的话，我想我都不会成为一个流亡的作家，我就不可能在伦敦写作。当然了，这不是我的选择，我甚至也没有选择的权利。当我们在这里正在讨论禁书的时候，我刚才脑子想到的就是我的朋友诗人王藏现在正逮捕了，和他太太正在监狱里。所以当我们在讨论这种恐惧的时候，你会发现恐惧的目的，也就是说给你施加恐惧的一个目的，就是希望你内心产生一种审查，这种审查让你这个设法找到一种安全感，但是你就什么都没有了，你不准思想，也不准写作，或者只能写中国共产党满意的那些词汇。所以我认为，我之所以能够成为一个流亡作家的话，主要是因为我要躲开那个恐惧，不然的话我没办法写作。
So absolutely, I feel this is the biggest danger that a writer can face, and it's precisely because of that fear, the fear that my writing would be destroyed by self-censorship, that I moved, that I now find myself in exile. What is here I am, here we are living in freedom and talking about censored books, but always in my mind, I'm thinking about those Chinese writers who are now in prison. You met Wang Zhang.
Yeah.
Wang Zhang, who is now in prison for the words you wrote. You must always remember that the fear of the aim of the fear, the aim of political regimes that want to instill fear in writers is that this censorship will happen without the need of censors, that it will happen from within, and writers will be willing accomplices in this system of censorship. Perhaps through this they might feel safe, but it is easy then to fool yourselves and to forget that in fact you are never safe, no matter how much your books are lauded by the authorities. And also know that you must also be aware that in fact, although you think you are writing words you want to write, in fact you're only writing the words that you are permitted to. And for me that is the death of a writer.
I have another one from Sally Davis, who asks, who says, I always yearn to be able to read a text in the original language. I feel I'm missing one side of the experience of the story. How much do you feel is lost through translation? I will again go to Dima first.
ديما
قد ايه بيضيع عبر الترجمة طبعا من النص. يعني سؤال فعلا شوي صعب، لأنه أيضا يعني يقلل شوي من بريق الترجمة. الترجمة هي حياة أخرى للكاتب وللكتاب وللمدن وللشوارع وللتجارب وللتاريخ. فبالتالي ما بعرف إذا السؤال هو هل الترجمة بتفقد النص شيء ما، أم إنه تغنيه للنص وبتعيشه بعالم آخر. يعني بقرأ أنا الكتب مترجمة إلى الفرنسية بشكل أساسي، أحيانا إلى الإنجليزية، لكن بشكل أساسي إلى الفرنسية. قليل ما أشعر بهذا النقص عندما أقرأ، لأنه بكون فعلا مأخوذة بمعرفة المشاعر اللي عم تعرف عليها للمرة الأولى وحسها للمرة الأولى، اللي بتخص مدن أخرى وبلدان أخرى وشعوب أخرى.
Well, this is a very tricky one, a very tricky question, honestly. But in a way, I will take the chance to disagree. If I got the question right, that whether there is an inevitable loss in translation, because this is in a way underestimates the huge efforts taken by a translator to, re-bring translated works in a completely different and a new life. They bring what they translate into a new life. So for me, I mean, I used to read in French, and many of the translated works into French, generally speaking, I tend to enjoy what I read in terms of translation, because I usually get charmed in what I read. I used to capture the very feelings and emotions and colors and of every living aspect of the reading, the writing I'm reading.
Thank you. And is that from Arabic into French?
No, not from Arabic. No, in Arabic بالعربي بقرأ بالعربي، لكن عندما بدي أقرأ شيء مترجم بفضل أقرأ بالفرنسي إلى العربية، لأنه للأسف الترجمة إلى الفرنسية بضل أفضل من الترجمة إلى العربية. ترجمة اللغات الأصلية أقصد طبعا.
Not necessarily, not mainly, I mean, from Arabic into French, because when I would like to read something which was mainly written originally in Arabic, I prefer to read it in Arabic. But possibly some works which have been translated from other language into French,
So how many languages do you read in, Dima?
لا فقط بقرأ إنجليزي وفرنسي وعربي طبعا بشكل أساسي 3 لغات.
3 languages, a little of English, more of Arabic and French.
It's very impressive. Right, I will move over to Ma and Flora. So what do you think is lost in translation?
什么东西丢掉通过翻译？什么东西丢掉？
这当然是个非常有意思的问题。我的直觉，当然我没有进入阅读，因为我是可以说是中国文化、中国的小说文学都从我身上就可以长出来，我不需要再去吸收什么。那么我的写作完全是从翻译作品开始。那么我也在怀疑，我读过的，比如说那个沃尔夫，是否跟他的原著有什么区别？当你读了10年、20年、30年、40年的时候，你会发现你就是翻译作品的一个直接的一个读者，他跟原著你感受不到太大的区别。如果要让我去区别的话，我试着用 Google 用什么去，我会发现区别仅仅是这样。如果是原著，比如说像那个尤利西斯，他的小说，你感觉到如果是一个彩色照片的话，就像我现在看到你们，那么通过翻译，我看到的可能是一张黑白的照片，它什么都有，但是可能缺一点什么。
So, my whole writing career, I lay down to the inspiration I've gained from translated works. They formed the foundation of my desire to write. Of course, as a child, I absorbed all the Chinese literary canon and the classics, but it was reading. 看到谁什么作
我们举个例子，像沃尔夫。Yeah.
Reading Woolf and Kafka, these were the great and all the great writers of Western literature. So I am a product of decades of reading in translation, and so I have always felt that there is something universal that is being communicated to me that is beyond language, and it's that has nourished me. And now, thanks to Google Translate, I can gain maybe I can instantly see a version of compare what I read on the screen to what has nurtured me for so many decades, and really what is lost, I think nothing essential. I think it's probably comes down to a few pixels of color, a few pixels of detail, but really I feel what is universal and essential is translatable and can transcend all boundaries.
Have you always read European classics in Chinese?
你一直是看到西方的通过翻译看到西方的语言。
呀，这一点其实也是非常重要的一点，就是说，有一个香港，有一个台湾，或者说中国还有一部分，他们会把所有的，包括那个《哈利波特》这样的书，我们都可以在很短的时间内全部都读到。有一点，我认为翻译是。它除了语言之外，翻译的结构是不变的，小说的这个技巧是不变的。也就是说，除了语言，所有的这个翻译过来的作品，其实都是一致的。
So yes, I have read everything I've read in translation, so I owe a great debt to the translators of the world. But what fascinates me is this feeling of transparency, of there not being barriers, of the essentials of structure, of meaning, of really the essence of literature, of it being sort of laid out before you on a platter by a translation, and feeling that you are eating the full feast.
Great, thank you. Now, a slightly more industry-based question from Andrew Bolton, which is, how do you persuade publishers to take the risk of publishing translation of works by authors who are unknown in the target country? I mean, this is an interesting one for you, Dima, because you're a journalist as well as a writer, if we can make that distinction. So you're on both sides of this equation, aren't you? And you're also a translator.
Yeah, Brahim.
أنت على طرفي المعادلة، أنت صحفية
I know، بس السؤال ما فهمته.
السؤال هو بخصوص دور النشر. كيف لدور النشر أن تتقبل هذه المخاطرة بنشر أعمال لكتاب غير معروفين أصلا في الثقافة التي ينقل إليها؟ أنا السؤال شوية غريب.
يعني السؤال بصراحة موجه لدور النشر اللي تاخذ هاي المغامرة، لكن بضل أنا ما بعتبرها مغامرة، لأنه دور النشر بالتأكيد لا تنشر بدون أن تقرأ، وبالتأكيد عندما تقرأ وبتشوف في شيء جديد مثير يسترعي الاهتمام، الانتباه، في معرفة، في عمق، في حياة أخرى مثل ما ذكرنا، فهي أكيد تهتم بالترجمة. لكن يعني صعب دايما في كاتب يترجم للمرة الأولى، وفي دور نشر غالبا بترجموا كتاب واحد لكاتب، يعني كتاب واحد فقط للكاتب من لغته الأصلية إلى اللغة المترجمة. يعني هي قاعدة موجودة لدى الكثير من دور النشر.
Well, I think possibly the publishing industry pioneers might be on a better place to address this question. I mean, because they are the risk takers in this regard. But what I would say that, I mean, it's not a big adventure. There is no big risk in this, because what I presume that most of the publishers read what is presented on their tables before they go for the choice of translating it. And unless they find something, I mean, interesting, they won't take the risk. And there is always something interesting, what I believe. There is always something exotic in, I mean, translating from other cultures and from other perspectives, having a different depth and different worlds to explore. And by the way, there will be always someone who is translated for the first time. This will be always the case. And in many cases, we see that many authors are being translated for once only, and that's it.
Yeah, we don't have a very good record with translation, really, do we? Although I think we are getting a little bit better. Flora and Ma, I'm just going to twist that question slightly. Have you tried to, obviously you work very closely together and you are published in the UK. Do you ever try to promote other writers, and have you had any luck with that?
你在英国有出版，有没有介绍一些别的作家，让他们在英国出版？
没有，
中国就是你不是做出版，你在香港做出版了，你出版了。
呀，我想出版是一个非常重要的一个环节，因为当我们写作的时候，其实我们是在扩大我们生活的空间。当然，我们需要出版社出了这本书。 然后我们也都知道，我们通过书才能够了解这个国家，了解这个人，了解这个社会。出版当然就是这么一个媒介。哎，这确实是一个对于中国来讲，确实是一个非常悲哀的事情。一说到这里，我突然又想到我们的认识一个朋友叫肖楠，他在中国出版，上个月他又被抓走了，又在监狱里。所以说出版 是一个非常重要的一个环节， 这个环节就是我们通过出版能够让我们了解那些陌生的东西、不知道的东西，它可能没有多大的在你生活中可有可无，但是它可以验证你的生活，它可以让你知道你的生活正处在什么样的状态。
你就是说的谁？
小南。
So yes, but publishing is a incredibly vital. It's a vital industry. I 就是你自己做了出版在香港. I myself have been a publisher in Hong Kong and have tried to when I lived there and tried to introduce published writers who were not well known in the mainland. In the end, the house was the publishing house was closed down. It had an office in Shenzhen. It was closed now. I've tried to introduce writers who are not able to be published in China to publishers here. And it's quite difficult. It's something I wish I had more power to succeed in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Now, I don't know who this question's from, but it's a very interesting one. And it's, are there any circumstances in which you would consider that there is still a meaningful role to be played by writers and artists who continue to live within a regime they are challenging with their works? Have you felt constrained in any way by the impact you can have from exile? Shall I move to Dima for that? It's quite a complicated question.
It is. السؤال هو كونك تعيشي الآن في الغربة، هل شعرتي بأنك مقيدة بمعنى ما من التعبير عن نفسك بحرية بسبب علاقتك التي ما تزال قائمة في المكان هناك بسبب وجود السلطات هناك? If I captured the question precisely, because it was a bit lengthy, I mean.
It was a long question, yes. I missed 2 bits. Have you felt constrained by writing from exile? And would you consider, or do you think there would be a value to staying in Syria?
وهل تعتقدين this is the other part. هل تعتقدين بأنه كان ليكون هنالك قيمة إضافية من بقائك في سوريا على مستوى الكتابة؟
ما بعرف قد ممكن يكون قيمة إضافية إنه أكتب بسوريا. أكيد يعني ثمة قيمة ما إنه أنا أكون موجودة بالداخل، لكن أنا برأيي عندما تكون قريب جدا من هذا الحدث فراح يكون من الصعب جدا الالتقاط التفاصيل أدبيا. احنا ما عم نحكي عن توثيق، ما عم نحكي عن فيلم دوكيومنتير، ما عم نحكي عن صحافة مكتوبة، عم نحكي عن رواية. فأنا بالنسبة لي القرب والمباشرة بخوفوني كتير وبيوقعوني بمطبات بالكتابة، وبحاول قد ما بقدر أني أبعد عنهم تماما. أكيد هون ما في خوف من النظام، ما كان عندي ولا مرة خوف من النظام، لكن كان في عندي مخاوف أخرى هي انعكاس للخوف الكبير يلي أنت مجبر تعيشه لأنك بتعيش بسوريا. فأنت إذا هربت من خوفك من النظام أو نجيت من أنك ما تكون شخص بيخاف من النظام من الأجهزة الأمنية، فأنت بالتأكيد رح توقع بخوف آخر ما له علاقة، يعني ليس خوف سياسي، ربما يكون خوف من المرتفعات، خوف من الطائرة، فوبيا ما، لكن الخوف موجود بكل تأكيد، له أشكال مختلفة بس منبعه واحد.
Yes, so for the first part, perhaps it could have been that there are some advantages for being closer, I mean staying and writing from Syria. But of course, first of all, writing from exile, I don't feel that sort of fear anymore. But for myself, I mean, precisely, I don't feel quite comfortable with being too close from the subject of my writing, from the material which I'm reporting on, because this is a literary and fiction. This is not a documentary or journalism in a way. So perhaps it's more advantageous for me to take that distance from the subject I'm writing about. And because being too close could have been quite bumpy and challenging for me. In a way, I did not experience that much of fear from the very particular political fear from the regime itself. But again, there has been that broader sense of fear to be living in Syria, because even though if someone escaped that political fear, he might be subject and he might be experienced, I mean, numerous sorts of other fears.
Thank you very much. Ma, obviously you didn't have a choice of living in China. Do you feel that that writers who are still writing from there can be truthful in the way that you can be truthful from exile?
你没有选择，你现在住在这里，你觉得中国作家在中国住，他们有没有办法就是用真理的说真话写真话，在中国写作的作家？
这个比较难。我们都可以看到，一个方方日记，现在都变成了一个非常非常恐惧的一本书。在中国，在武汉，这是上个月的事情，所有的医生都接到了通知，谁如果告诉武汉发生的事情，将以间谍罪给抓起来抓捕。也就是间谍罪，你们知道是可以枪毙的，不是一般的犯罪。也就是说，在中国这样的环境，如果要是你能够写出一个真实的中国，或者让你感觉到把这个谎言给打开了一点点，那么你就变成了，你就将被消失，所以几乎是不可能的，你听不到那个社会所发出的声音。
So it is very, very hard. Just look at the plight of the writer Fang Fang, whose diary of the Wuhan epidemic was published. She is being vilified. I just read this week that doctors have had to sign a document acknowledging the fact that if they dare tell the truth about the Wuhan epidemic, they will be branded traitors of the nation, and we all know that crime it has the death penalty to it. So sometimes the most that one can do is open a little window onto the truth, but it is impossible to swing the windows wide open and to give the unfiltered, uncensored description of the truth there. And because everyone knows that if you do that, you will be vanished, you will be disappeared.
You said something very interesting to me when I interviewed you a little while ago about why you are no longer practicing as an artist. You started out as an artist and then you became a writer. And it just strikes me that is very relevant to this discussion we're having tonight. Why is it that you can be a writer and not an artist?
就是他采访你的时候，他问你为什么不是一个选择不是画画的，你从画画变成一个作家，他觉得你的回答很有意思，你能再解释一下为什么选择不画画？
其实有好多原因，当然有一个主要的原因就是，我记得我的老师跟我说的也很清楚，就是我现在教你画画，你是我的学生，但是你永远不要画人，因为画人容易犯错误，容易被抓起来。他就是因为是个画家，所以他被打成了右派， 所以你会发现在中国，非常危险。你动用了这个，你产生一种思想，你想自由的表达，监狱的大门是给你打开的。所以我其实很早就知道，我必须有一种自由的意志，而且我要去完成我自己。既然画画能够被你们发现，那么我可以做别的，我可以用文字。所以，而且文字不容易被抄家，因为我的画室曾经被警察全都给打烂了。那么我现在只有一支笔，所以对我来讲，可能是更适合我成为一个作家，因为我可以用文字可以表达我的思想，表达我的处境，或者说表达我的恐惧。甚至现在我在伦敦，我刚写完了一本书，就是《流亡伦敦》。如果我在中国的话，我是写不出来的。那么这本书就表达了我为什么流亡到了伦敦，我才有了观察中国的机会，我才能在伦敦看到了我自己，看到了我们家，看到了我们的社会，这一点是非常重要的。
So yes, there are many reasons why in my late 20s I decided not to paint again. One was from remembering that when my art teacher, when I was at school, and he told me, he said he saw I had an artistic talent, and he said, I will teach you, but you must promise only ever to paint landscapes and never to paint portraits, because portraits can get you in trouble. And he had, because of a portrait he had painted, he had been branded a rightist and had gone to prison. So I always felt, so I painted landscapes, I painted abstract paintings, but in the late 80s it was even these non-figurative paintings got me in trouble, and the police came to my tiny studio and tore down all the paintings that I had posted onto the walls and ceilings. I was arrested, and when I came back and I saw these paintings in shred on the floor, I knew how vulnerable those images were to destruction. And then I vowed never again to paint, and it was from that day that I started to write, because not only because a pen, I can travel, words can never be torn away from you. They have their own existence that is, that cannot be destroyed, that you can always keep safe. And also I felt that they could express more deeply and profoundly the inner torments and fears that I experienced, in a way that these colors and images that were so fragile and prone to destruction couldn't. There was something that was more eternal in the written word, and that's what inspired me to become a writer. And then he talked about exile, and agreeing that the distance, he has just finished a book about exile, and he agrees with that idea that exile is in fact a privilege, and it allows you a very essential distance from your subject matter, a sense of perspective, not only in time and space, in culture and geography, that you wouldn't be able to have if you hadn't moved from your place of birth.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's absolutely fascinating. I could go on asking you questions all night, but then you'd never get any writing done, so that wouldn't be any good. You can read a lot about Ma Jian's journey in Red Dust, which is available still, although it was published back in 2003, and I would definitely recommend it. It's absolutely fascinating and extraordinary stories as fictionalized autobiography. But obviously also the Frightened Ones and China Dream are available now, and you can get them from the bookshops when bookshops reopen, hopefully. But we're going to have to stop, I'm afraid, and I'm sorry if we've missed anybody's questions. They were great, and thank you for being such an engaged audience, although so safely distanced. And I just want to say, put in a little word for the amazing work that both English Pen and obviously the British Museum are doing, and how important it is, particularly at this time, to support them in any way you can, obviously by attending events like this, but also by making donations if you have any capacity to do so. And English Pen, as you probably will know, campaigns and supports writers around the world, as well as celebrating international writing in a raft of talks and awards. It's a very buzzy place to be. There, we also, I can talk personally, we also have private members only meetings where we get to meet really extraordinary writers and discuss all the big pressing issues of the day. And I don't think that I really need to say much about the importance of the British Museum, which is one of the great institutions of our country. And you know, when you think that it's bringing stories of humanities and shared histories and cultural achievements to absolutely millions online, who, you know, more now than it's reached before. But our support ensures that it'll be able to continue to make programs like this one available to as many people as possible around the world. Details how to join PEN or how to donate to the British Museum will be on the chat line, so please do so. And meanwhile, very, very sincere thanks to our speakers, Ma Jian and Flora Drew, and Dima Wannous and Ibrahim Kadouni, and thank you for your translation skills.
A pleasure. I hope I was helpful. Thank you very much. I appreciate it very much.
And thank you to the audience for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.